Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to this program. Tonight, I'd like to return to the theme of good governance and the people. I'll start with a quotation um, which I picked up on the social media. I think there's some truth in this quotation. If you tell a Zimbabwean the truth, you instantly become their number one enemy. But if you tell them lies, you'll be their best friend and the king. Now, Zimbabwe politicians have realized this national weakness and they're capitalizing on that, thus making their personal fortunes out of the psycho sickness lovers of lies. Welcome to you, Benjamin.
Good day to you, sir. Thank you for having me on the program. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. Yeah, I must say it's for me. I find it, very correct, very truthful. You know, for some of us that have taken a stance to ask or to question some of the ideas that are put in place by some leaders in different organizations, we have become very, very unpopular. Not with the leaders, but with the mob. And I must remind our viewers that most of the time the mob is always on the wrong. Look at even in the instances, in the Bible, you always find that the mob was wrong. But I'm not going to give that as an excuse. But it seems as if now, you know carrying lies or telling people what they want to hear brings about popularity. You have a lot of followers, whether it be on social media. But if you come with a stance where you want to tell the truth, you want to engage, you want to teach, right, and you want to hear other people's opinions so that you can also nation build, you become very, very unpopular. Why? Because you find out that it is now the citizens of Zimbabwe that defend their leaders, no matter what. Whether they be in Zanu PF, they find absolutely nothing wrong with what Mnangagwa is doing. Whether it be, Chamisa is telling lies or not fulfilling any of his promises, just like his Zanu PF, counterpart. People become very, very angry with you. So I must agree with what the writer says there.
Well, I'll take the first aspect of it. If you tell Zimbabweans the truth, you instantly become their number one enemy. But if you tell them lies, I think that is not true. No one, if we're going to give somebody the intellect to be able to differentiate between truth and lies, no one would deliberately accept lies in contrast to the truth. Take, for instance, the issue of Nelson Chamisa telling the electorate last year that Triple C is going to win big because he has plugged all the vote rigging loopholes and what is in it. One has got to ask, did the 2 million or so people who voted, who participated in those elections and voted for Chamisa, did they believe that? The answer is yes. Did they believe it was a lie? No, they didn't. They believed it was the truth. How anyone can believe such a blatant lie beggars belief. Because, like I've said so many times at this platform, there was no verified voters roll. One of the most basic requirements for free, fair, and credible elections. And to believe that Triple C would win elections, rigged elections, just because Chamisa has plugged the vote rigging loopholes, and yet has failed to ensure that there was a verified voters roll, something as basic as that. You know, one has got to say, no, here is somebody who really has failed to appreciate the difference between a truth and a lie. And so I think on that point, it is important that people should understand that the voters, many of the voters out there, really have no clue what is going on here. It's a matter of believing in Chamisa without knowing whether he is right or wrong. It's an act of faith. And this is dangerous for democracy. Democracy demands that the electorate should be well educated, knowledgeable, and diligent. And if we've got an electorate that is so ignorant, gullible, and naive that they believe a blatant lie like that, that is where the problem starts. And to be quite honest, this is not the first time that has happened. In 2018, Chamisa was on record saying MDC Alliance has stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. When he was asked, what are those stringent measures, he wouldn't say. Soon after the election, he was the first one to claim that the elections were rigged. Did the people learn anything from that? Clearly not. These are people who just believed in whatever he said as a matter of faith. That is the problem with democracy. Democracy demands an electorate that is informed. Yes, you can make mistakes, but if you keep on making the same mistake over and over and over again, that is unforgivable. So the problem we have in Zimbabwe, we have got an electorate that is very ignorant, gullible, and naive. And they want to believe anything they are told, especially by the leaders. And so the second bit, the last bit where the leaders are exploiting them, that bit I agree with.
But I would like to ask a question to say, do you actually believe that it was a matter of faith that the people, actually participated, or it was just hope and fool's hope for that matter? Because, I mean, you expect even the not so educated to learn from history. We're talking of history. It's not the first time this has happened. It's not back in 2018 when this started. We are talking of decades of rigged elections. We cannot continue saying ignorance, and we keep winking an eye at it. You would expect people to learn. So it cannot be faith, because faith, is got works in it. It's got substance, some area of thinking, Whereas hope is just, okay, I'm going to close my eyes and or bury my head in the sand and hope this fire will pass by, So I can't say, I can't justify and let you say faith. I think it is just foolishness that we keep getting conned. And the last bit, I will agree with you. Our leaders have seen that these guys are foolish to actually believe the nonsense that we preach. And, we can get away with it. Let's just run with what it is and just go and see. They will always participate, basically. So I couldn't say faith, because faith has got some form of intuition, some form of thinking. The hope is just, I will sit down and I hope that probably it will work out.
Well, I think that is, I will say that is more semantics, because that's what I said as well, that ignorance uh, uh, implies that you do not understand what is going on, but you just believe it. And faith to some degree demands you have no proof of what you believe in. You just believe in it. You believe in God. You've never seen him. You've never touched him, and to say it's logic. I think it's one can debate about it, but the point I think we're making is still the same, that there is a degree of naivety, blind faith, or ignorance with the electorate, and that is a serious problem.
And foolishness.
And foolishness, yeah. And I totally agree with the second aspect, that the leaders have been exploiting it, making the most of it. Because,
I agree.
In this particular case, when you look at the MDC, they know that they've never been held to account. Why is it that you told us you were going to win big and then nothing happened? The electorate have never asked them that question. I've often compared the naivety and ignorance of the Zimbabwean electorate to Boxer the horse in Animal Farm. Boxer failed to learn the alphabet. That's how ignorant he was. He tried, but he failed. And he could not string any two ideas together to make an argument. And so what did he do? He gave up on his right to think for himself and to try to understand what's going on, and believed everything that Napoleon did in the book. And so he adopted this motto, Comrade Napoleon is always right. He was never going to question whatever he said, whatever Napoleon did. And for anyone else to question what Chamisa does, that's where we move one step further. Whereas at least Boxer accepted what Napoleon did as the faith, as an act of faith. Comrade Napoleon is always right. In this case here, we are talking of the Zimbabwe electorate. Their mentality, some of them, has reached a point where if you dare challenge what Chamisa said, you become public enemy number one. I personally, and I think it's not only actually me, but I've seen comments by people who have dared to question what Chamisa was doing. And the public reaction to that was unbelievable. It's as if they've questioned something that you should never question. As if Chamisa is a god, infallible God. How dare you question an infallible God? Chamisa is an ordinary mortal. And in this particular case, he is already proven to be corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. And people must accept that. And if they ask you, why do you say that? You give them the reason. Look, the MDC's primary purpose, ever since they were elected when the party was formed in 1999, was to implement the democratic reforms to ensure there are free, fair, and credible elections. And after 23 years, they failed to implement even one. How can you say you're competent when you've failed to do the basic task that you had? And they had the golden opportunity to do so. But with some of these people, they don't listen to that. Because, of course, they cannot listen to it because they can't process that. Because their mentality is you accept whatever Chamisa says in the same way that Boxer the horse believed in Comrade Napoleon is always right.
Yes, I agree with you there. And it's not just only, for the Chamisa followers. It's also there in Zanu PF. Zanu PF says, when you question the authority or those that are in authority, they have a saying to say, Warasika Gwara. And, of late, the Chamisa followers, the moment you question, they say, Kuti, you are Rakash. So this kind of just makes it difficult to have an opinion. Basically, it's taking away opinion, it's taking away fact, it's taking away the ability for somebody to ask questions. And yet, both divides always, kind of like, push each other down to say, it's this side that is worse, but you can find out that they have similarities on that. And for me, it's quite scary, especially like we always say, for democracy to exist, all those should be present. The ability to ask, the ability to think for yourself, they have to be present. And those are fundamental for democracy to exist. But if we take away that, then we are in trouble. Hence, we find a lot of people are blindly just following, blind loyalty, if I may say.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk of Chamisa supporters, in this particular case, I totally agree with you. The same mentality is shown in Zanu PF and was shown before that. If you were following the politics of Zimbabwe, soon after independence, Mugabe was a god. To criticize Mugabe was unthinkable. Even at the height of Kukura Hundi, there were some people who would not accept that Mugabe could do anything wrong. Even when you point out to him, look what is happening in Matabeleland, in the Midlands. That was genocide. You cannot deny that. And what kind of a leader are you who commits such an outrageous crime? And yet these people would not accept it. With the same mentality that we see now, that some people would not accept that Chamisa would do anything wrong. That point is taken. I think that point is important to underline that the mentality here, when one talks of MDC supporters, one does not have to enumerate all the parties, all these opposition parties, including Zanu PF. The same mentality is there. The greediness, corruption, incompetence that we talk about with CCC leaders was there in MDC, is there in Zanu PF. So I think in this particular case, personally, I do not bother to enumerate all the parties, all the individuals. When I say somebody is corrupt, incompetent, and the evidence is there, you can also produce the evidence of corruption and incompetence and, in fact, murder in the case of Zanu PF. So I think that point is taken. Let's go on to another point here, which I thought this was an interesting one. This is a video that has been circulating in my social media of this Zimbabwean lady.
Last summer, we went on an unforgettable road trip across Zimbabwe. I finally got to take my husband back to my home country for the first time. He got to experience the food, the wildlife, and the most breathtaking sunsets. To explain the story a little better, we have to go back to the beginning.
Well, I would not bother to go into any more details about that one. But I think the essence of the story is, I find it outrageous that there are Zimbabweans who would go to town praising Zimbabwe, and and yet they praise it when they visit the country. They don't want to live there. Many of them have left the country. And I find that sheer hypocrisy totally, totally unacceptable. We have got to be honest with what is happening in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, yes, it's a beautiful country. But to those who live there, Zimbabwe is a nightmare. The country is in serious political meltdown. There is serious political oppression. And we can't keep on talking about the beauty of the wildlife and so forth and forget the people. I find that really annoying in my view. What do you think, Ben?
You know, they always say one swallow doesn't make summer, and I think for this lady, this is very applicable. In Zimbabwe, it's understandable from where she is coming from and how probably she was on holiday. She does not live in Zimbabwe. So for somebody that left a very early age and started and just decided, let me go and visit Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe to visit, it's a very, very nice country, and you obviously have the money. She's backed up by the ability to pay. She's coming from pounds, right? So she can go and see all the big five, travel, tour around, fly probably, right? Because the roads are horrible. So she is not living the true Zimbabwe life, the life that our relatives and our friends and our other citizens that are in Zimbabwe, the lives that they are living every day, having to try and make a decent meal, to try and put together a decent meal, not only for them but for the children. So for her to say we enjoyed the food, others are not enjoying the food because they don't have the variety that probably she was enjoying. So I don't think she qualifies to speak for everybody. Zimbabwe is beautiful. It's a very beautiful country with the wildlife is amazing, for sure. She is right, but not everybody can afford to go and see that wildlife. So she is just talking from a tourist point of view, not as a citizen.
Well, even as a citizen, or even as a tourist, you cannot start praising what is happening in Zimbabwe and forget the tragic reality of the people who are living there. That is my point. And particularly more so for a Zimbabwean who should know better.
From her point, she is talking to say how she enjoyed. She's not talking about how others felt. She's talking about herself, how she enjoyed. Because she's on holiday, so she ought to enjoy. But yet she talked about the others. I think probably then we would have heard what people had to say. So I think it's selfish for her now to draw conclusions of the whole country for everybody. I think she should have just said she enjoyed herself. She enjoyed the beauty, not to say for everybody.
Yeah, but I think the point I'm trying to make there is there is nothing wrong with you enjoying the beauty of the country and so forth. But you cannot talk of the beauty of the country without also talking of the tragic reality on the ground. You know, in this particular case, unless she was traveling somewhere else, not the Zimbabwe I know, the roads are in a terrible state. The basic infrastructure in Zimbabwe is in a terrible state. You know, except for the really expensive hotels. When you drive by the roadside, you can see the poverty of the ordinary people. In urban centers, the street kids and so forth. It's hard to say that you can, even as a tourist, you can enjoy and obliterate and rub out all those evidence of the tragedy in Zimbabwe. You know, at the present moment, I don't know when the video was taken, but at the present moment, for instance, with hyperinflation, you must realize it's hitting the ordinary people. One of the things that I've been to foreign countries, you immediately see is how there is one life for those the tourists who can afford, we've got the foreign currency, and another one for the ordinary people who live there. As much as you can talk about the beauty of the wildlife, the flowers, and so forth, you cannot also leave out the economic realities. But my other point there was that Zimbabweans, there are Zimbabweans out there who, on numerous occasions, will sing praises of Zimbabwe and how it's doing well, because they are benefiting from the system. There are many children of the ruling elite who are in the diaspora. They would not tolerate hearing anyone, you and me, criticizing Zanu PF and the way the country has been run down. They are singing the praises of that country, of that regime, you know, and looking for the scapegoat, the usual scapegoat for the economic, if there's economic hardships, they blame sanctions. But the reality is, whether it's sanctions or whatever, you cannot forget the reality there. And for them to be praising when they are just visiting, and as soon as possible leave the country, that is the hypocrisy that I cannot overlook. That is sheer hypocrisy. If you are so galvanized by what Zanu PF is doing, how come you're not living there? You go there only to visit a couple of weeks, then you leave. If it's such a great country, why are you leaving it? Why are you not going there to settle? After all, you're a Zimbabwean. She's a Zimbabwean. She could go and settle there with her husband, build a grass-thatched hut in the rural areas, particularly in Zimbabwe, where you are told you are not allowed to own any piece of land. No ownership of any property. This is, I think that is what I was concerned about. But anyway, let's move on to this other quotation here, which is from this guy here. He's a Mexican revolutionary who famously said, if there is no justice for the people, let there be no peace for the government. It's Emilio Zapata. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, in normal situations, this should happen. But like we just said, it brings us back to the first screenshot that you put out there to say, and we actually concluded that right now it is now the mob, it is now the povo who are protecting government, who are protecting leaders, that they are now what they don't make mistakes, they don't lie, We must just follow. So all these things can only work once we have an ability to think for ourselves. It all boils down to the ability for one to scrutinize, to analyze, fact finding, and then ask questions. That is when all this can only, work. Because this is when we are talking about democracy. Without us being able to do that, all this is just a mirage. It's a fantasy.
Well, just for the record, this quotation, Zapata said it while he was fighting the government. He was later on to get into power himself. And the poverty and oppression continued after him as well. And I agree with you. It takes us back to the situation where leaders particularly are in the habit of saying the right thing before they get into power. And once they get into power, they become a replica of the same oppressive, tyrannical, and corrupt regime that they were criticizing before. So I think it is imperative, and I agree with you as well, that the people themselves take the trouble to really understand what is it when you say there's no justice for the people. What constitutes that justice? Because until you've understood it yourself, the guy who comes in will have the same oppressive tactics as the one before him. And you'll exploit your ignorance of what constitutes justice. So on that note, I would like to say thank you very much to the listeners for joining us, and I hope you will be able to join us again tomorrow. Thank you very much, Benjamin.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.